In this video, I really want to talk about fishing water temps between about 45 and 50 degrees. Now, specifically, I want to talk about this when it relates to kind of late winter, early springtime, kind of the early pre-spawn period, and not necessarily when it hits 45 or 50 in the fall time, because those two water temps, although the same, at different times of the year, they can mean drastically different things. So in this video, we're going to talk about fishing that water temp between about 45 and 50 in the early pre-spawn. Now, before we get into it, this video is brought to you by my apparel company, Fin Fishing. And as many of you guys know, recently I have launched an all new product over at Fin Fishing, which is the new Fin Fishing Duck Hat. This is a waterproof, highly durable, super lightweight hat. To me, it is really the perfect hat when it comes to being outside and being in the outdoors. As you can see, I have a black version and a gray version. Now, this is a snapback hat. And it's actually this is actually on the back, it's actually a rubber. It's not kind of like that hard, rigid plastic that you see. So this hat is very comfortable. It also has a rubber patch on the top. So very awesome hat, something that I'm very proud of. And right now for the end of February, so just a few more days, I'm doing a sale, kind of an introductory sale on these hats. So I'm gonna leave some links down below in the description. Shopping at Fin Fishing is truly the best way to help support this channel. I greatly appreciate all of you who have done so. All right, let's talk a little bit more about kind of this water temp, 45 to 50 degrees. Now, what I've seen specifically in the pre-spawn is that lakes that freeze over, typically 45 to 50 degrees is kind of when a lot of bass start to push up shallow. Now, lakes that don't freeze over, maybe you live down south, a lot of times the 45 to 50 degree range is some of the coldest water temperatures that you will find. And so it kind of makes a difference depending on where you live in the country. If you live more in the south, a lot of times if you see 45 and 50 degrees, those fish are really in kind of their wintertime patterns. But up in kind of the Midwest, in the northern parts of the country where you have a lot of lakes that freeze over or at least get into the 30s during the winter, to me, 45 to 50 is really kind of a significant number when you really start to see a lot of fish push up shallow. Now, with that being said, there are so many factors that go into this outside of just a water temp, because water temps definitely give us an idea of what bass are doing, but it doesn't give us the full picture, because you could go to the lake that you're fishing and see that it's 49 degrees when you get to that body of water. But if you don't pay attention to the weather beforehand and the weather that's coming, that 49 degrees may make a huge difference as to what the bass are actually doing. For example, if you had a cold front and that water temperature was maybe in the upper 50s, and all of a sudden you had a massive cold front in the spring and it knocked the water temperature down to 49, fishing in that situation is a lot different than if the water temps the week beforehand were in the low 40s and mid 40s, and now they've reached 49. And so one of the most important things that you can always do, and this really goes into any time that you go out there fishing, is follow the weather. Now, if you are fishing on a local lake where you kind of know what the weather has been doing, then you're probably good to go with this. But if you're going to a lake, for example, maybe you're going and you're traveling, 100, 200, 300, 400 miles away to fish a certain body of water, it's always good to look at what the weather's doing beforehand. In a lot of lakes these days, you can go on a line and you can kind of get somewhat of what the water temps have been doing. So you can see if they've been higher and come down, or if they've been really low and they've come up. But I think that is probably the most important place to start when you're looking at water temps that are between 45 and 50, because I know that for me, when they first start to hit 45 and 50, I'm telling you, you will see in my region, the Midwest area up north, you see a lot of fish that are starting to move up. And in my opinion, a lot of times the fish that first move up into shallow water are some of the biggest fish that live in your lakes. I was just over on the Serious Angler podcast a few days ago talking about this same thing. And Bailey over there asked me, like, what fish do you find that pull up? And we both kind of came to the same conclusion on what we've seen over the years. And the thing is that those fish that first move up, it always seems like they are the biggest ones. And this is what I think. Kind of after the podcast, I kind of thought about it a little bit more. And what you see is that some of the biggest fish in the lakes are typically female, right? And those females are typically, during this time of the year, fat with eggs. And just like your wife, when she is pregnant, for those of you who experienced a wife that's pregnant, like me, I have 3 boys. And when they get towards the very end of getting ready to have that child, they're ready. They're ready to go, and they are ready to be at the hospital and getting this thing out of them. I don't think that bass are 100% like humans, but I think that maybe sometimes it is similar, where the females are fat and they are full of eggs and they are ready to dump these eggs. And so it seems like the females are a little bit more ready to be shallow and start the whole spawning process, where the males seem to lack a little bit. Now, when that water temp starts to get in kind of the upper 50s, especially in the low 60s, I think you kind of have a reverse, where I think that all of a sudden a bunch of males start flooding the banks and they start making those nests. And then basically what I think happens is that you're fishing in the same areas. There's the same amount of females in those areas, but now there's a ton more male bass, and you tend to catch more male bass because they're a little bit more aggressive leading up to the spawn, because they're the ones that are getting ready to not eat for several weeks. And then what happens, the females end up moving up and you end up catching females in some of those same areas. But when the water temps are in the 45 to 50 degree range, I really like to look for a little bit more off-color water, and I like to fish it in the afternoons. To me, over the years, in the pre-spawn time frame, like I said, when you get that water temp, you tend to have a lot of fish that start to move up shallow. And to me, I've seen it happen mostly in the afternoon time. There have been lakes that I have fished. There's one that's really close to here. I fish all the time. And what I do in the morning when I fish there, when that water's in that degree range versus the afternoon, is completely different. You know, the water temp on the main lake where it's clear might be 46, 47 degrees, but I'm typically fishing in 15, 20, 25 foot of water. But as that water temp really creeps up there, later in the day, even just a few degrees, you will see those fish just start to push up shallow. And what you see a lot of times too is you will see these really shallow, flat pockets that are substantially warmer than the rest of the lake. I mean, the rest of the lake might be 48, 49, and then you'll have this random pocket that's 53, 54, especially in the afternoon, and you will be blown away by how many bait fish and how much life is already in the back of those pockets. And a lot of times I think that those bass just follow them in and they eat up a little bit. Now, sometimes those fish can be a little bit hard to pinpoint, but I have seen a lot of times 45 to 50 degrees, those fish are moving up and getting really shallow. Now, again, if I'm fishing, if I'm looking for muddy water, we talked about this the other day, there's a few baits that I really like. One of them is going to be a spinner bait. I love a spinner bait in muddy water in the pre-spawn. It is a great big fish bait. Another one is some sort of crankbait. You know, a Fritz side crankbait, a Rapala DT6, a Berkeley, what's it called? A honey badger. Those are really great cold water baits. There's a number of them. A shad wrap is a really good cold water bait. And so those baits, crankbaits, spinner baits, I'm gonna throw those a lot this time of the year to try and locate stretches. Because a lot of times you're trying to find a pocket. You're trying to find a small stretch where these bass are, and then you can kind of come back and slow down. Now, my top slow down baits in those areas is a jig or a Texas rig tube. I think that a tube is an overlooked cold water bait at times because a tube has a very natural action. It kind of glides. It doesn't have a lot of appendages like a crawl does or other baits that have a lot of flipping and flapping. It just kind of glides through the water. And therefore, I think it's a very good cold water bait. I've caught a lot of cold water bass on a Texas rig tube. So that bait and a jig are by far my best. If you need to finesse, you know, your Ned rigs and your shaky heads tend to be really, really good baits as well in kind of that water degree temp. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is that sometimes you can't find off-color water when you're fishing in that 45 to 50 degree range. Some lakes across the country, they tend to just be clear in general, especially a lot of natural lakes. A lot of natural lakes across the country, they are just very clear year-round. They typically have a lot of grass and rock in them. And so therefore, the water doesn't get very mixed up. You don't have a ton of off-color water. The good thing about specifically natural lakes is that those fish in natural lakes, I think because they have so much grass, those fish will live shallow almost year-round. Like, you could break the ice in the middle of winter and be in 6 and 7 foot of water, and there's grass down there and there are bass down there. And so I have found that fishing up in the northern part of the country in that water temp, there is still a ton of fish that are shallow, regardless of it being kind of murky water. But the big thing that changes is my bait choice. Now, to me, in clear water, the number one thing that I probably pick up is a jerk bait. I have a tremendous amount of confidence in a jerk bait, especially in that water temperature. And I'm not going to say it's the only lure I throw, but it is one of the only ones that I'm going to throw, and I'm going to throw it a lot because it works great in clear water. It works great as a bait to cover a ton of water. And then again, after you start catching fish, you can slow down a little bit. Now in clear water, again, I'm gonna slow down with kind of the same baits, jigs and tubes. I also might go to finesse baits a little quicker and go to things like Ned rigs and jig head minnows and shaky heads and stuff like that pretty quick too. So guys, fishing in 45 to 50 degree water is a great opportunity to catch the biggest fish of your life. And so make sure that you do it this year. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to check out the fin hats, and I will see you guys tomorrow.